Hi, my name is Eva Steiner, and this is my project Psychotherapists Around the Globe. I am interviewing the psychotherapists around the world and asking them the same 8 questions. I am wondering how mental health profession is in their country. Today we are going to
Thank you for doing this interview with me. Before we start, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. My name is Evelyn Munoz. I am a clinical psychology from El Salvador. I am 37 years old and I have around 11 years working as a psychologist.
Tell me a little bit about your culture. What is some holiday or tradition that your country celebrates? And if your culture would be an emotion, what emotion would it be?
First, Salvadoran culture is very rich, and it's a result from pre-Hispanic civilization mixed with Spanish civilization, as well as many other Latin American countries. We have a lot of holidays. Some are celebrated around the globe, but others are mostly Salvadoran. So, for example, we have Valentine's, we have Mother's Day, Father's Day, but we have some different holidays. For example, on May, we have Day of the Cross, and this is like a special holiday where the tradition says that Spanish people and pre Hispanic cultures used to have a symbol of a cross, and they carried fruit, vegetables, and it was a special day to celebrate the harvest, that they had food to eat. It's a special celebration, right? And for example, also we have Easter, but in El Salvador is called Holy Week. A large portion of Salvadoran people is Catholic, so the celebration of this week is very big, and they have parades. We also have, for example, Labor Day, and usually the working class celebrate this special day by having parades, and also it's like reminder of people trying to find the best working conditions, and they try to fight also for working rights. We also have, for example, Independence Day, Christmas Day, New Year's. I think that those are the biggest celebrations of holidays that we have. And in terms of emotions, I think that my culture could be represented by happiness. I think that around the globe, Salvadoran people are characterized by being very positive. They are always smiling, or, for example, if someone foreigner comes, they're always very welcoming. They try to be very nice with people. So I think that happiness can relate to my culture.
When you
Yes.
describe the emotion as happiness, you feel like people are truly happy or they are like presenting the happiness?
I think they are mostly presenting happiness. El Salvador has been usually a poor country. Economy is not that good still. It's a struggling situation. Salvadoran are, even if they are poor or they are struggling, they try to be welcoming and be kind.
How did you become a psychotherapist in your country and what is your therapeutic approach?
In El Salvador, to become a psychotherapist, the only way that we have is to study bachelor's degree in psychology, and it's in general psychology. We don't have specialized career, for example, in clinical psychology, but we first have to study the bachelor's degree, and then you can find master's degree in clinical psychology. I went to the university and studied this major in psychology, and then I took a master's online on clinical psychology. Later, I started to find some interest in cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's what I specialized in.
And in El Salvador, If you study psychology, so with no direction, are you allowed to work with people already, or do you need a major in the clinical psychology, for example?
In university, we have a small course in every field of psychology. For example, we have clinical psychology, but we also have for human resources, for example. And usually during university, we have supervised practices, and you are able to work with patients. Okay, but if you want to do it outside, you better have a specialization.
Is there any law for psychology or psychotherapy?
Yes, we have a board of psychology that supervises all psychologists in El Salvador. Let's say that it's not that rigorous. We don't have something like very strict. So some people just study this bachelor's in psychology and they can start working as clinical psychologists. There is not much control or very strict control about it. But we know that if you want to do things correctly, you should specialize.
Are you able to work in public sector or just in private sector or both?
You are able to work in both. There are different opportunities. For example, we have a lot of working field, for example, in schools, in public schools.
How much interest there is for this profession?
It has been increasing during the years. For example, in psychology board, every professional has a number. That is a number that indicates how many professionals in psychology there are in El Salvador. And for example, I'm number 4,000 something, I can't remember. And now it has escalated, like maybe tripled, because people are more interested in working in this field because they can also see that there is more demand.
How society looks upon psychotherapy or any psychological help?
Salvadoran culture is also very traditional. There is still some reservation or maybe still some stigma around psychotherapy, but it has become better during this time. I think that after the pandemic, since cases really rose in number, I think that the stigma is lowering, but there is still some stigma, mostly with men. Usually, men do not seek for psychologists and they don't seek for help. Usually, it's more something for women and not that for men. So I think that it's improving, but there is still some reservation in people.
And why do you think there is a reservation? And what is this mental health stigma that you are noticing?
For example, they usually say that you do not need a psychologist because you're not crazy. Okay, so they relate psychologist is the same as being crazy, and that's why you need help. Okay, so culturally, it has not been something that people care about or that it's a priority for them. Mental health has been put in a second place in our country. For example, the health system is not like that good. And if the health system is not good, can you imagine mental health? Okay, so it's not taken as a priority. So I think that the stigma comes from the same culture of okay, I can handle this, I will do my best. And it's a matter of having a good attitude and trying to resolve my issues. But we know that at some point we all need help. That does not mean that we are crazy or that we have a mental problem, but people still have that idea.
And do you maybe know how did people address mental health problems in the past?
Many years ago, people with mental health problems were put in asylums, for example, or they said, okay, this person is I don't know, possessed or something like that, and they take them to the priest. It has been an issue before because there was no understanding of what mental health was. As I said, even today, we only have 2 psychiatry hospitals in El Salvador, and we don't have any private institutions that work with these mental health problems. So before it, people were mistreated, and many were just left with no attention, no possible treatment. And it's really sad, but we are trying, and there has been a lot of advances in that subject.
What is your society teaching about child-parent relationship, and whether these values of society also influence how you design your interventions?
Usually, parent-child relationships are also very traditional. The mother is the care provider and she stays at home. The father is the person in charge of providing, working, and the mother is usually the one putting the rules at home. That was the traditional way. Now it has been changing with the new generations. For example, now we are talking more about positive discipline, parent and child relationships that are healthier, not trying to be that tyrant that imposes rules, but to become more flexible parenting. I think that that new way of parenting is very helpful in designing these interventions. With working with parents and children and adolescents mainly, it's very important to try to bring the family to this point, because we have found that it is a better way of parenting.
And what is the role of a child? So what is expected from the child when they are young and when they are maybe adults?
For example, here in El Salvador, a very common phrase that parents use is that your only job is being at school. So you have to get good grades. Children are expected to do well in school, to have good grades, to have good behavior. They are expected a lot of things, like to have moral values and to go along the rules of the family. And while being adults, when kids grow up and they graduate from school, our culture is a bit different from others because people usually stay with their parents. They live with their parents while they go to university, if they stay in the country, and they usually leave the house when they have a stable job or when they get married. So as adults, they are required to try to seek their independence financially, in these terms of having their own place, their own house, and also to build a family.
And is there any expectation that they need to stick with their parents? So, for example, if an adult client would come to you and say, I don't want to contact with my parents anymore, how would you approach?
It varies from case to case, because usually people that have a little bit more financial stability, they try to send their children to study abroad, and they usually leave when they finish their studies. But people that don't have the money to send their children to study in another country, they are expected to spend their university years, for example, at home. Only when they are stable, they are expected to leave. But parents are usually very overprotective also.
What are the learned beliefs regarding client-therapist relationship? And can the relationship continue outside the therapy once the therapy process is over?
This client relationship, I think that is very rigorous. we are expected to maintain a very professional relationship. It's very important to try not to mix, right, our personal life, for example, with this relationship, because we know that it can be very harmful for the process, for the therapeutic process. And it's not permitted that we can have a relationship after, for example, the process is over. If it's not in a professional way, or just like to keep in track the progress of the client, then it's prohibited.
And is supervision a must for a therapist in your country?
Yes, but mostly at the beginning. For
Mhm.
example, as I was saying, it works like this. You are in university, you get like a very quick glimpse of all the areas of psychology. But when you have the course on clinical psychology, you are expected to have clinical practices, and they have to be supervised. Also, for example, when you are starting to work mostly in private practice, and I think that it's something that is starting to be required at public practice also. At first, when you are beginning, yes, it's something that it's demanded that you have supervised practice.
And after, so where is this? Now you are a beginner, you need a supervision, but now you are experienced therapist, so it's your decision. Where is this line?
It's really not a clear line. As I was saying, maybe the guidelines or the laws that the board has, they're not very clear. It's recommended. I think that it's the first year. And during these supervised practices, we usually have more contact with other professionals, and there are circles of professionals that discuss cases, and that we try to do it in a really regular basis. But it really depends on the professional. It's not something that is demanded or required.
Mhm. Also, for example, in the hospital, let's say a psychologist work in the hospital, does the hospital provide supervision, or it's up to you?
In this case, the hospital provides the supervision. As I said, like maybe it's a little bit more rigorous in the public system than in the private practice. It mainly depends on the professional.
What are the most common complaints that the client comes to therapy for?
Right now, I think that the most common complaints are anxiety and depression. Those are the two more problematic situations right now. Of course, after the pandemic, I think it's a global phenomenon, right? That these mental health problems have increased a lot. There are some other cases, for example, like obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's in a lower number. And also, for example, eating disorders. I think that they have also increased a lot after the pandemic.
Why do you think this increase is happening in anxiety, depression, and eating disorders?
I think that the pandemic was a situation that put a lot of stress for people. It was a situation where we couldn't go out, where we interrupted our routine, our habits. The consequences of being isolated are now this anxiety and this depression. For example, in teenagers, their whole process of being social or having study habits or being able to go to school every day was interrupted. So now it's like they have to start all over again. The usual processes that we have were interrupted. So I think that people are now have to learn again how to socialize, for example, or to maintain their jobs and how to manage stress. So I think that is why after the pandemic, everything has become a little worse for mental health.
And do people seek therapy? Or, for example, for a therapist in a private practice, how hard it is to get a client?
I think that now let's say it's not that hard because people are seeking more therapy. For example, for my special case during the pandemic is where I mostly had clients because everyone needed someone to talk with, and it's when teletherapy started. For me, it was good because I helped people, and I also personally was occupied. And nowadays, for example, of every day of the week, I do have clients. And it's because people now see the necessity of having help and seeking therapy. Adults seek now more help, but mainly they try to find help for their kids or for teenagers. And during the process, they find out, oh, okay, maybe I need help too. But now adults are more aware. And for example, there are more programs for psychotherapy also in the public sector. They, for example, have a special hotline where you can call and say, okay, I'm having this situation and I need help. It has become better, and now it's a little bit easier to have clients that seek for help.
If you would share one tool, belief, or approach that is a must-have for you as a therapist, what would that be?
I think that it's a hard question because as cognitive behavioral therapists, we know that we have a lot of tools that are very, very necessary. But one approach that has become very important to me is mindfulness approach. I think that people find it very practical, very helpful, and it helps reduce their stress, their anxiety. They have very good exercises. For example, when I'm sitting in traffic and I just want to go crazy, so okay, I can take a step back and try to have a couple of minutes for this mindfulness exercise. So I think that has become very helpful for me and also for my clients. They find this exercises and approach very helpful.